Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Wordsmith's Forge. I'm Matthew J. Coran, and today our episode is titled The Art of Foreshadowing. And so I want to get into this because I think it's a very important aspect of storytelling. Not even just the foreshadowing itself, but this also helps you to understand what to include in a story and what not to. And even if you're not writing, what to look for in a story and what's just worthless fluff, in my opinion. Right? So we're going to get into the principle known as Chekhov's gun. And what is that? I got the Wikipedia pulled up right here. It's a narrative principle that states that every element in a story must be necessary and irrelevant elements must be removed. Right? So the example he uses is a gun. If you have a gun hanging on a wall in one scene, you better be firing it in the next. Otherwise, it shouldn't be there at all, right? And this is a principle I stuck very close to with my storytelling. I'm going to get into this with Heir to Song and Sword here because it's you don't need to give needless details, right? I've received this criticism before. I've seen other people debate about this when there's not enough description in a scene, right? It's like, oh, well, what about, like, you say there's a living room. What about all the chairs and the fireplace? You can mention a fireplace, set the mood. But, like, all of the different knickknacks and everything, it's like, it doesn't matter, right? One principle I tried to stick close to is understanding why I'm writing this story. The reason you write a story is to send a message, regardless of what it is, right? There's genres out now where, like, it's literally just about entertainment and feeling cozy, or it's a thriller, it's just meant to elicit certain emotional reactions. And I'll be honest, that's not my book. It will never be my books. I'm more of the opinion that stories should be to convey a certain truth about the world in a way where people can understand it. Like the way Jesus Christ explained a lot of the facets of the kingdom of heaven, he did it through stories, through parables, right? And I see novel writing as basically a very long parable. And so with my book, I tried to make it so then, I tried to set the scene up enough where you can picture it in your head, but I wouldn't do it to the point of exhausting the reader. I would let them fill it in with their own imagination, right? Because that's one thing I always hated about a lot of fantasy is that they will get into such excruciating detail about things I don't care about and I forget about 10 minutes later, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care what color the building is. Unless it's like something weird, like it's a shining rainbow building, right? Hopefully not a pride building. But there are times where these little details can be helpful. Like, for example, in my book, I had Sim bringing down his cart of produce, right? And he has his melons, his berries, his zucchinis, and I have him as he's going downhill, right? It's very difficult. It's like a high stakes balancing act for him, and he drops a zucchini. And just the fact that is there shows how much he's struggling, right? But I also use that later because he dropped that zucchini. He's like, it's fine, whatever. And he doesn't go back to get it. And so later, when he and his mother are being escorted out of their home and through the town square, they go down that same hill, and his mother trips over the zucchini that he dropped. And so everything I put in there serves a purpose. I shouldn't even say that. It can serve a purpose, right? Because you can drop something in there and leave it, or you can come back to it later and it can serve a greater role. Like that zucchini also represented Sim's negligence and also his tendency to blame himself for things because he thinks it's about his negligence, right? He's like, I neglected my mother's needs in bringing this man into our house, this fugitive into our house, which caused us to be escorted out and reprimand or apprehended. And now my negligence of not picking up that zucchini, it hurts her even more, right? Like I'm just neglecting my mother left and right. It just adds on to an ongoing struggle within Sim. And so, yeah, even those little things can play an important role. And if they don't and you have no intention of it, just leave them out, right? Because no one cares. Everyone's going to forget. And it doesn't add to the story at all. That's a great rule of thumb, actually. If something does not add to this story, if it doesn't contribute to it in some way, why have it? Right? You're just, at that point, you're just trying to fill a word quota, which is dumb, right? It doesn't, no one pays for fluff. The more fluff in a book, the less likely I am to read it. And there have been books where it was a lot of fluff, and I'm like, this is painful. And so, I also want to highlight an example because I've said this before. I mostly didn't get, I got some inspiration from fantasy. You know, there's some books I read where they really stuck with me. Brent Weeks is one of the best cases of that. But most of my inspiration came directly from the Bible. And the Bible is the best example of this because it's the best story ever told, because it's the truest story ever told. And the way foreshadowing works literally in the history of the Bible is absolutely astounding, right? And so I'm going to bring up a kind of obscure example, but really nails the point. It's one that you might not hear very often, but the mention of Melchizedek in Genesis. This is actually very important because this is brought up later in the New Testament. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now, he was the priest of the Most High. That's right out of Genesis 14:18. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now, he was the priest of the Most High God. So, right there, we have the priesthood of Melchizedek pointed out, and we have foreshadowing of Holy Communion with bread and wine, right? Because then in Hebrews 5:6, this is now New Testament. This is thousands of years later. We see traditionally attributed to St. Paul bringing up the priesthood of Melchizedek, which Jesus is the high priest. Hebrews 5:6, also in another place, God says, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek," bringing up Psalms 110. Psalms 110 is about Jesus, by the way. Let me even bring up Psalms 110. I lost it because I clicked on a different link. I'm just pulling up Bible Gateway here. Psalm 110. I misspelled it. Hang on. Are you kidding me? Okay. I'm just going to read Psalm 110 after 12 times trying to type it in. Here is the Lord's proclamation to my Lord. Already a reference to the Trinity. God to the Son. God the Father to God the Son. Sit down at my right hand. Jesus sits at the right hand of God. And this is also referenced in Daniel. Until I sit down at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord extends your dominion from Zion. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people willingly follow you when you go into battle. On the holy hills at sunrise, the dew of your youth belongs to you. The Lord makes this promise on oath and will not revoke it. You are an eternal priest after the pattern of Melchizedek. And I'm not going to go any further than that because that makes the point. So yeah, we have so many references to that one little detail in Genesis. Lays the foundation for understanding the role of Christ as high priest, right? And also understanding the Holy Communion, because Jesus takes the bread and the wine and he says, "This is my body. This is my blood," right? People think that's a metaphor. It's not. It wouldn't make sense for it to be a metaphor, because what's the metaphor? Like, oh, it's following Jesus. Like, he says, "This is my body." The same way he says, "Let there be light," and there was light. He says, "This is my body," and it became true. Right? And so it's like the ultimate foreshadowing. There's so many places in the Bible where that's true. And like I could go on for hours with examples of this. And that's why like it's I mean, for many reasons, but this book is living and it's eternal because of how rich in the truth it is, because it literally came from the truth, from God. And so every novel we write is kind of like a mimic of that. It's a shadow of it. Where every novel is like I said, every novel is a parable, or it should be a parable. And it's like a microcosm of the Bible, where the story should be written in some way where it points to truth. And God uses foreshadowing to point to the truth from the old to the new across thousands of years. And this is why God is the master of foreshadowing, right? And so my best advice to understanding how to use foreshadowing in your story or how to identify it is see how it's done in the Bible, because it's done masterfully. And so that's going to be it for this video. Hope this was educational, edifying, entertaining. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care and God bless.